Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the weekly MMA Cycles Market Update. This is Gianni DePocia, your host. It's Friday, so that means that it's time to review what happened in the stars last week and how that might have impacted financial markets. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the charts, starting off with the Dow Jones. Last week began, there were a lot of jitters coming out of the weekend. We had Mars square Uranus on the 26th of June, and that coincided with some geopolitical turbulence. It seemed like there was a coup attempt unfolding in Russia, but within 24 hours, that virtually went away. So I suppose at this point, there was no coup, but we knew that we were in the shadow period of Neptune retrograde, which happened today on the 30th of June. So we had to be careful in terms of what we should believe or not. Now, stocks reacted pretty strongly this week. We had a GDP revision upward for Q1, and then we had a lower than expected inflation report on Friday, the core PCE number, that is the Federal Reserve's preferred metric. And, I just would advise some caution here with the whole notion that inflation is defeated. We had Saturn go retrograde earlier in the month, and now with Neptune going retrograde, I think that there's some misplaced expectations on what inflation may or may not be doing. And then, of course, earlier this week, we had a trine between the sun and Saturn. But, when we look at the Dow Jones here, the big thing that we see here at MMA from a technical standpoint is this inverted head and shoulders formation. You have the left shoulder, the head, and the right shoulder, and we're coming up against the neckline. And we know that looking ahead into next week, that Venus is going to be forming a square with Uranus. And Uranus is notorious for breaks of support or resistance. Venus rules stocks. So this is a pretty significant geocosmic signature going into the holiday week next week. Markets will be closed on the 4th of July in observance of Independence Day in the United States. That's really the only main geocosmic taking place next week, but we can't rule out a breakout higher in stocks. If we take a look at the NASDAQ here, it's kind of already happening. The NASDAQ loving the lower than expected inflation report. We know that tech and growth stocks tend to not like a high inflation environment. We saw that manifest in 2022, but ever since Saturn moved out of the sign of Aquarius and into the sign of Pisces, we've actually seen Saturn become a headwind for commodities and crude oil instead of tech. So the NASDAQ is doing very well and is poised to close out a new multi-month high here on Friday, June 30th. Let's take a look at the 10-year yield on the Treasury. Down a little bit here on Friday, but overall up on the week. We're in the time band for a culmination of very important cycles. We need to be alert for that. And with the Venus squared Uranus approaching, we can't rule out that this was a high of significance and that we could decline for the next 2 to 5 weeks, meaning that bonds will go up and interest rates will go down. And I think this would be a most welcome development, given that we're in prime real estate season right now, and there still is a major lack of inventory. And what we're seeing is a lot of the real estate activity shifting to the new home sector. So I actually want to look at the home building ETF. We covered this XHB ETF in the monthly ETF report here at MMA Cycles. And I'm actually going to zoom out so we can take a look and see how strong the home building sector has been year to date. We are less than we're about 5% from the all-time high that was registered back in 2021. So what we're actually seeing take place in the real estate market is home building companies offering mortgages at a couple points below what the market is. So, if the 30-year mortgage is going for 7% on a new home, the home builder is offering an interest rate, for example, perhaps at 5 or 6%. So that's where we're seeing most of the activity now. But this is a most welcome sign and a signal that the consumer is still hungry for new homes or to change locations. Let's take a look at the US dollar down here on Friday, not really liking that lower than expected inflation report. And this could be a high of significance that formed on Thursday, since this was within the orb of the Venus square Uranus signature. So keep an eye on the dollar here. This could be a lower high, but overall, I think that if the Fed continues to raise rates, going forward, it looks like we're going to have another rate hike at the end of July. Then we should see the dollar resume its uptrend. But we know Venus retrograde begins on the 22nd of July, and that's a notorious period for central bankers shifting their monetary policy objectives. So we need to keep a close eye on that. Let's take a look at GDX, the gold mining ETF, a really nice bounce here off that low on Thursday. We know that Neptune retrograde typically is a favorable signature for precious metal markets, at least within a couple of weeks. And we did end up having gold prices fall into our downside objectives that were stated in the weekly and daily MMA reports. We were looking for a low in the 1910 area. I'm actually going to pull up a spot price of gold here. You can see that the low of Thursday, June 29th was at 1900.6. So that is always nice to see. Let's take a look at USO, the crude oil fund. Nice finish to the week here. And, this isn't surprising given the strength that we're witnessing here. Neptune's turning retrograde. So the question now is, are we about to see another lower high, or is this whole notion of inflation coming down just misguided? We know that Neptune can be deceptive, and Neptune rules crude oil, and it would be typical of Neptune to misguide investors into believing inflation is over or, coming down permanently right around the time that crude oil is at or near an important low. So that's something to keep an eye on in the week ahead. Let's go ahead and take a look at Bitcoin. Pretty volatile finish to the week here on Friday. It was up nicely early in the day, but then it was down, recovered quite a bit here. And, this is another market that I think is going to be heavily under the influence of the upcoming Venus-Uranus square over the weekend. Again, look for a breakout or a break of support. If we don't get the breakout, I would look for Bitcoin to sell off sharply. But we know that we're in the early stages of a primary cycle, and that tends to be a time when markets exhibit more bullish behavior. So if Bitcoin starts to clear resistance here, as it could very well under this Venus square Uranus, we could rally to a new multi-month high. So that's all of the markets that I wanted to review with you today. Thank you so much for watching. You can check out all of our work at www.mmacycles.com. In the next month, we're going to have a series of guests. We're going to have Matthew Kaiser, MMA's copper analyst, Wyatt Fellows, MMA's grain analyst, and also William Stickovers, another renowned financial astrologer, will be joining us later this month. So stay tuned. I always enjoy having guests on so we can interview them. And then also on the 16th of July, we're going to be having the mid-year MMA webinar update. So it's going to include Ray Merriman, myself, Matthew Kaiser, and Wyatt Fellows. We're going to be giving our forecast for several markets. Details can be found at www.mmacycles.com. So thank you so much for watching. We'll see you same time, same place next week.